Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My wife was expecting a child, but it wasn't mine. My mother knew and hid it. I handled the divorce, but it was my father who delivered the final blow. Hi everyone. My name is Maxwell, but most people just call me Max. I never imagined I'd end up sharing my personal life on the internet. But here I am, writing this at 3 in the morning because I just can't keep it inside any longer. I thought I had everything under control until life blindsided me with a betrayal I never saw coming. I'm not a writer, so bear with me if I stumble a bit while trying to lay this all out. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a project manager at my father's solar installation company here in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah, I know what you're probably thinking, nepotism, right? But don't be so quick to judge. I earned every promotion, every bit of respect, through hard work. I started working there at 15, scrubbing down solar panels and organizing tools, basically the lowest helper on the ladder. I didn't mind. I wanted to learn. I learned every piece of the business: electrical work, roofing, inverters, batteries. If it had anything to do with solar energy, I did it at some point. By the time I turned 24, my father promoted me to project manager. Not because I had his last name. Believe me, he'd fire me faster than any stranger if I was slacking, but because I delivered results. I could coordinate teams, meet deadlines, and handle city permits without everything turning into a nightmare. The pay was good, about 95 grand a year, plus bonuses. It let me buy my house 3 years before I even got married, with no debt other than the mortgage. My ex-wife, Jasmine, or Jessie, like everyone calls her, she's 30, a registered nurse pulling in around 70 grand a year. We met at this sports bar close to her hospital back when she was about to graduate. I remember thinking she seemed so focused, so determined, and just down to earth. I'm going to pass my boards on the first try, she told me that night, holding a half-empty beer. I laughed. Confident, huh? She smiled, that calm, steady smile that made me think she had her whole life figured out. I have to be. Too many people already doubt me. I thought I'd found the one. But to really understand how things fell apart, you have to know a bit about my family. My dad, Ronald, but everyone calls him Ron, is 58. He built his company from nothing, working himself to the bone through his 20s and 30s. By the time he hit his 40s, he was signing contracts for malls, office parks, big jobs. These days, our crews handle multi-million-dollar solar farms. Dad has an old-school mentality. You work hard, you earn respect. You don't get to cry about it. Everything he built came from sweat and sacrifice. And he has zero tolerance for laziness or excuses. Then there's my mother, Brianna. She's 56, retired from the local school district. These days, she spends most of her time burning through Dad's money and gossiping with her church friends. She acts like a saint, but she's the first to rip someone apart the second they turn their back. And then, there's my younger brother, Evan. He's 28. I don't even know where to begin with Evan. He's the perfect example of what's gone wrong with some people in my generation. He's never held a real job. He started working for Dad, doing the simplest tasks, scheduling appointments, managing inventory, earning 55 grand a year. Dad kept hoping Evan would mature, so he kept giving him more responsibilities. But the truth was, Evan acted like he was doing us a favor just by showing up. Dad wanted him to get his hands dirty with field work the same way I had. He put him on roofs when he was 16, trying to toughen him up, but Evan? He'd show up late, complain about everything: the heat, the tools, the safety gear, then he'd disappear into the air-conditioned truck while the rest of us were out there under the brutal 115 degrees Fahrenheit Arizona sun. I'll never forget one job. He was 19, sent to a commercial install in July. It was blazing hot. He lasted 2 hours, before he started clutching his head and claiming heat stroke, so he could go home. The rest of us still had 8 hours to go on that rooftop. We finished the 10-hour shift while he sat in the shade. After that, Dad was mortified. The crew started calling Evan the delicate one. I could see how embarrassed Dad was. While I was busting my back learning every inch of the installation process, Evan was at home, burning hours on video games and blowing through money he didn't earn. When I bought my house, he had the nerve to shoot me one of those smug looks. Wow, must be nice, he sneered, having everything handed to you. Handed to me. I snapped. You know how many weekends I've worked? You want to swap paychecks? He just smirked and went back to scrolling on his phone. Then when Dad promoted me to project manager, Evan couldn't resist. Oh, sure, he muttered. Pure favoritism. Favoritism. As if I hadn't been sweating on rooftops since I was a kid. As if I hadn't learned every wire, every inverter code. 2 years ago, Evan dug himself into a hole. Credit cards maxed out. car payments he couldn't keep up with, the classic living beyond your means routine. Dad, trying to help, loaned him 20 grand on a 2-year repayment plan. 3 payments in, Evan's excuses started. Dad, I'm short this month, I'll catch up next time. Work's been slow, you know how it is. But the worst part? He was driving around in a leased BMW that cost more than most people's rent, strutting around in designer clothes like he was some hotshot. He'd tell anyone who listened he was basically an executive, when really he was pushing paper and answering phones. And Mom, she acted like he was a hero just for showing up 5 days in a row. Maxwell, she'd tell me, be more supportive of your brother. At least he's working. Yeah. Meanwhile, I was closing an $800,000 commercial contract. But sure, let's throw a parade for Evan because he managed to set his alarm clock. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. But when you're clocking 70 hours a week trying to build something solid, you don't always notice the snakes in your own backyard. January 2023 should have been the high point of my entire career. Dad landed the biggest contract the company had ever seen, a $6 million solar install for a medical complex in downtown Phoenix. That was the kind of job that could change your life forever, open even bigger doors down the road. Dad looked me right in the eye and said, Max, this one's yours. Don't screw it up. I nodded. I won't. The demands were insane. Medical grade standards, daily inspections, absolutely zero tolerance for errors or delays. On top of that, it was an active hospital. Any electrical failure could literally put lives on the line. I practically moved onto the job site. 12-hour days, even weekends. There were times I'd pull in at 6 a.m. and drag myself home at 10 p.m. The technical side was no joke, either. A hospital needs redundancy, backups on top of backups. We installed the primary solar arrays on the roof, with backup systems on the ground. Every inverter had to meet medical-grade standards, and the batteries had to tie directly into the emergency power systems. It was precision engineering, and everything had to be absolutely flawless. At first, Jessie understood. She'd even come by sometimes, still in her scrubs, with a takeout container from the only place open at that hour. I figured you wouldn't eat otherwise, she said, pressing the warm box into my hands. Thanks, I told her, rubbing my forehead, exhausted but grateful. She'd smile softly, trying to hide how tired she was herself. This contract could change our future. We had a plan. Once I collected my bonus from the hospital project, we were going to pay off the house and finally start investing in rental properties. Jessie and I talked about it for months, how owning a couple of duplexes or condos could build security for our future. But while I was drowning in electrical schematics, city inspections, and impossible schedules, Jessie started going out more and more with this travel nurse named Lauren. According to her, Lauren was fun, single, and knew all the best spots in Phoenix. Come on, Max, she'd tease me one night when I was buried in the blueprint for the backup battery systems. Lauren wants to go out for tacos on Mill Avenue. You never want to do anything. I remember glancing up from the plans, eyes blurry, and saying, Babe, I'm trying to make sure a hospital doesn't lose power during surgery. Forgive me if I'm not up for margaritas tonight. She laughed it off, but the next thing I knew, she was out partying 3 times a week. Gone were our quiet movie nights, our takeout and couch routines. I should have noticed, really seen what was happening, but I was so buried in work I just assumed she was trying to fill the time, keep herself distracted while I practically lived on the job site. Then came February. That's when the first real sign slapped me across the face. Jessie had always had a stable schedule, 3 12-hour shifts, usually Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Everything about our lives as a couple was built around it. I knew exactly when she'd be home, when we could grab dinner together, when to plan a weekend away. But suddenly she was picking up extra shifts. Constantly. Mandatory training. She'd shrug when I asked. New protocols at the hospital. She explained another time. Then, we're short-staffed, I can't say no. Except the schedule never officially changed. She was still working Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays on paper, but somehow she was gone 5, sometimes 6 days a week. Around that same time, Evan started popping by the house whenever I wasn't home. I'd come back after a 14-hour day, exhausted and barely able to see straight, and Jessie would casually say, Oh, Evan dropped off a coffee for me. Or, Evan helped me fix that door you never got around to. At first, I was relieved. I thought, okay, maybe Evan's stepping up. Maybe he's finally acting like family. Even at work, he seemed different. He started dressing sharper, button-down shirts, pressed pants, fresh haircuts. He came in on time. He even offered to work weekends. Dad was so proud, talking him up to everyone. Evan's finally growing up. Dad told me one evening when we were going over project budgets. Yeah, I nodded. It's about time. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. But then, everything shifted. Jessie started picking fights. Complaining. One night, I came home after 9, bone-deep tired, just hoping to microwave dinner and zone out in front of the TV. Before I even got my boots off, she was on me. "So this is our marriage now," she snapped. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You come home, eat what I left you to reheat, and pass out." I stood there, hand on the back of a kitchen chair, still catching my breath. "Jesse, I'm working. You know this project." She cut me off. "When was the last time we actually talked, Max?" "Really talked?" I tried to keep calm, tried to reason with her, even though my brain felt like fried circuits. "It's temporary. We talked about this. We both agreed this contract would secure our financial stability for years." Her eyes burned. "I didn't get married to be a lonely woman with a ring on her finger," she fired back. "Other husbands make time for their wives. Other husbands don't treat their house like a hotel." "Jesse," I pleaded, "this is a $6 million contract. We're talking about our future." She threw her arms out in frustration. "Our future? What about our present?" "I'm 30, Max," Jesse told me that night. Arms crossed so tightly across her chest, she looked like she might snap. "I shouldn't have to beg my own husband for attention like some desperate woman." I took a deep breath, trying not to let the exhaustion boil over. "You're not begging for anything," I said, fighting to keep my voice level. "You knew exactly what this project involved when it started." "I knew it would be demanding, sure," she fired back, "but I didn't know you'd turn into a stranger who's more obsessed with solar panels than with his wife." I tried to explain, tried to make her see reason. But no matter what I said, it was like she'd already decided I was the villain. Jessie acted like I was ignoring her on purpose, when in reality, I was working my tail off to give us a better future, something stable. I did what I could to make it up to her, bringing home her favorite Thai takeout, picking up desserts she liked from that bakery near the hospital. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. In March 2023, we finally finished the hospital solar installation, ahead of schedule and $50,000 under budget. That was a win. We even got a performance bonus, which Dad was already planning to reinvest in new equipment. I hoped, that would bring everything back to normal. But by then, normal didn't even exist anymore. Even though my workload slowed down, Jesse's schedule somehow got even crazier, more extra shifts, more training, more supposed emergencies. Then April came, and it hit me like a brick in the face. I finally had time to actually look at my life, and what I saw was like realizing your favorite restaurant had been serving you cardboard all along, but you'd been too busy to taste it. The first real clue came from her morning routine. Jessie started waking up at 6 a.m. on the dot every day and racing straight to the bathroom to throw up. And it wasn't normal, mild nausea. I'm talking full-on, pale and shaking, clutching the toilet. Afterwards, she'd stand in the shower for half an hour, sometimes longer. One morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the bathroom and found her slumped over the toilet, her face white as a sheet, practically gasping. "Jessie," I said gently, kneeling down next to her. Are you pregnant?" Her reaction was like a slap. She went rigid, eyes wide, not a flicker of joy, no excitement. Just raw panic. "What? No. It's just a stomach bug," she stammered, grabbing for a tissue to wipe her mouth. "There's something going around at the hospital." That made zero sense. We'd been trying since October to have a baby. She'd gone off birth control. She'd been tracking her cycle on that app. We talked about fertile days, ovulation, everything. We were open about it. She was 3 weeks late. 3 weeks. When I pointed it out, she snapped. "Why are you tracking my period like a psycho, Max? I know how to manage my own body." That wasn't normal. Not for a couple actively trying to have a child. At the same time, my mom, Brianna, started acting strange too. Usually, she'd call the house landline, like she'd done for years. Suddenly, she was calling Jesse's cell phone directly instead, every single day. And the calls weren't quick check-ins. They were long, drawn-out, hushed conversations. I'd come home and hear her on the patio whispering into the phone, or locked in our bedroom, door closed. I'd catch bits and pieces, things like, "You have to be careful with that," or "Make sure everything is under control." If I got too close during those hushed phone calls between Mom and Jesse, they'd end abruptly, like clockwork. That was weird, really weird, because for the past 4 years, Jesse and my mom had barely tolerated each other. Suddenly, they were having secret, half-hour-long conversations. That was enough to put me on edge. I started paying closer attention to the stories Jessie told about work, and they stopped making sense. "I worked a double shift," she'd say, breezing through the door with a huge grin, practically glowing. "Double shift?" I asked once, looking her up and down. "You look fresh. Shouldn't you be dead on your feet?" She laughed it off. I had a second wind. But she wasn't exhausted. She didn't smell like disinfectant. Her scrubs had no blood stains, nothing that looked like she'd really worked the ore. When Jessie actually assisted surgeries, she always came home wiped out, with that sharp, sterile smell clinging to her. Then there was the money. I noticed she'd been pulling out $200 in cash every Friday for 2 months straight. Hey, what's with all the cash withdrawals? I asked her one night while we sat on the couch. Jessie barely blinked. Going out with Lauren is expensive, Max. It's easier to use cash, so I don't overspend on the card. Something about how quickly she answered made my skin crawl. And then there was her phone. Always in her hand. Always lighting up with notifications. Her face beaming like a high school girl with a new crush. But the second I walked into the room, the screen went dark and she'd hide it away. I tried to ignore it. Tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. But the final straw hit me in mid-April. My truck wouldn't start one Tuesday. So Jonah, one of our foremen, gave me a ride home around 2 p.m. earlier than usual. I opened the front door and heard something I hadn't heard in months. Jessie laughing. Not the polite, tired chuckle I'd gotten used to, but a real, belly-deep laugh, like she was genuinely happy. I stepped into the living room, and there they were. Jessie and Evan. They were sitting way too close, closer than any brother-in-law should ever be with someone's wife. The moment they saw me, they jumped apart, like I'd caught them red-handed. Jessie blurted out, "What are you doing home so early?" Her voice cracked, just for a second. Meanwhile, Evan practically tripped over himself, spilling coffee on his shirt. "Oh hey bro. I was just, in the neighborhood, checking on Jessie. You know, you've been working so much, I figured I'd, keep her company." I just stared at them. My mouth felt dry, my hands like stone. Jessie tried to force a smile. "It was sweet of him," she said, not meeting my eyes. "He brought me coffee from that place downtown." I nodded slowly. "Very thoughtful," I managed to say. But inside, everything felt wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there replaying every weird thing from the last few months. Evan's visits when I wasn't around, Jessie's weird schedule, the cash withdrawals, the phone calls with my mother. It all lined up, every piece clicked. A pattern I couldn't unsee. The next morning, I decided enough was enough. I was going to find out exactly what was happening. First thing, I went to the company records. Evan had access to job sites and to the vehicles through our fleet management system. I pulled the GPS logs from his company truck for the last 3 months and cross-referenced every stop. What I found was damning. Evan had made dozens of stops at places completely unrelated to our solar installations. There were records showing Evan's truck visiting my neighborhood during work hours, over and over. It wasn't just once or twice. It was frequent. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Stops at a hotel in Scottsdale. A hotel that had no connection whatsoever to any project we were working on. There were other stops too, at restaurants in parts of town where we had absolutely no business presence. So I pulled up our shared calendar. Jessie and I used it to coordinate everything, from her shifts to my inspections. When I lined up the GPS records with Jessie's claimed hospital shifts, it all clicked. Every single time Evan's truck pinged one of those shady locations, Jessie had told me she was on a double shift or stuck dealing with some medical emergency. I couldn't deny it anymore. I kept digging, this time through our bank statements. Those $200 Friday cash withdrawals? They weren't random. They were a pattern, consistent, like clockwork, for more than 2 months. I found restaurant charges, hotel charges in Scottsdale, on dates when Jessie had sworn she was working overtime at the hospital. I started a notebook, writing down every lie, every discrepancy. It was so painfully obvious, a blind man could have seen it. Then I decided to push it all the way. I called the hospital, voice shaky, faking a family emergency. "Hi, I need to speak to Jasmine, Jasmine R. It's an emergency. I'm her husband," I told the nurse on the phone. "Hold on. Sir, let me check," she said. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, there's no Jasmine R. on shift today." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure? She worked last night, and she told me she's on again tonight." I pressed, praying somehow I'd misheard. The nurse double-checked. "No, sir, she wasn't scheduled yesterday either." That was it. The last shred of doubt was gone. Next, I turned to her email. We'd shared passwords for years, since our anniversary, as a gesture of trust. That Thursday morning, I told Jessie I was staying home sick, some stomach bug. She bought it without question and left for what she claimed was a mandatory training session. As soon as the door shut, I powered up her laptop and logged in. The first thing that popped up was a subject line that nearly stopped my heart. "Make sure Max doesn't find out." I felt an icy knot twist in my stomach. My hands were shaking as I clicked it open. It was a thread, 3 months worth of emails between Jessie and my own mother. At first, in February, Mom sounded cautious. "Are you sure about what you're doing? Maybe it's just a phase." But as the weeks went by, their messages turned cold, calculated, like conspirators. My own mother was actively coaching Jessie, coaching her on how to lie to me. "Say you picked up an extra shift. If Max asks, tell him there's a mandatory training." She even offered her house as a hideout. One email from March made me want to punch a hole in the wall. Ron plays golf on Thursdays until 6 p.m., so you have at least 4 hours. Evan can come in through the side garage door. I'll make sure the neighbors don't see anything. Another. Tell Max you have a double shift on Tuesday. Ron has meetings until 10 p.m., so the house will be empty. Evan already said he's sleeping at the job site that night. I scrolled further, and then my worst fear confirmed itself. In mid-April, Jesse had emailed my mother. I'm 8 weeks along, and my mother had written back, "Can you be sure whose it is?" Jesse's reply burned into my mind. No, the timelines line up with both. My mother's response to Jesse's email made my stomach turn. Make him believe it's his. He'll be a better father than Evan anyway. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. When Jesse asked what to do if the baby looked like Evan, Mom replied like she was talking about swapping out a faulty appliance. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, just make everything seem normal. I could barely breathe reading those words. My own mother, my mother, willing to help hide a child that might not even be mine. I spent more than 2 hours glued to that screen, taking screenshots, saving the most incriminating messages to a USB drive, printing out stacks of emails and bank statements. They'd planned this betrayal for months, smug and confident I'd be too busy to notice. They were wrong. After gathering every shred of evidence, I called Dad. My hands were still shaking when he picked up. "Dad," I said, voice hoarse, "I need to see you at the office. Now. I can't talk over the phone." There was a pause. Then, "I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, we were sitting face to face in his office. I laid it all out, the emails, the GPS data, the receipts, everything. I didn't hold back. When I finally stopped talking, Dad just sat there in stone silence, processing it. Then, with a terrifying calm, he looked straight into my eyes. "I'll see you at Matthew's office in 2 hours, he said flatly. "Don't talk to anyone until we have a plan." Matthew was our company's lawyer. Dad had already called ahead, and Matthew had cleared his entire afternoon for us. We showed him every last document, emails, bank statements, the GPS logs, even the shared calendar. Matthew went through everything with the precision of a surgeon. His verdict was clear. We had enough to move fast, protect the business, and protect me. His instructions were methodical. Secure the money. Protect your assets. Document everything. And do not confront anyone until the legal safeguards are locked down, Matthew said. First stop was the bank. I transferred $95,000 from our joint account to my personal account, leaving exactly $1,000 behind so Jesse wouldn't suspect anything right away. I double-checked my premarital assets, $140,000 in retirement funds and stocks, all safely documented as separate property beyond Jesse's reach. While I locked down the money, Dad was working on Evan. He canceled Evan's company accounts, revoked his vehicle privileges, and told Lucia at the front desk that Evan was being reassigned. His key card would stop working Monday, and the company truck would be disabled. Evan would find out the hard way. I also blocked all our joint credit cards except one with a $1,000 limit. I removed Jesse as an authorized user from my personal cards. Every move was cold, calculated, and completely above board. That night, while Jesse was in the shower, her phone lit up on the bathroom counter. I glanced over and read the preview. "Evan, can't wait for tomorrow at Mom's house. Dad's working late, so we'll be alone." Perfect. I screenshotted it and sent it straight to Matthew. More proof, in case anyone tried to spin a different story. And then, in that moment, I made my final decision. I called Dad. "Can you set up a family dinner at my house for Saturday?" I asked. He didn't even need me to explain. "Understood," Dad said, and hung up. He reached out to Mom and Evan separately, telling them it was a mandatory family dinner because I had an important announcement to make. The next day, Friday, I broke the news to Jesse. "Hey," I said as casually as I could manage, "just so you know, there's a family dinner here tomorrow night. Dad wants everyone here. It's important." Her whole body tensed up instantly. Jesse started firing off questions so fast I could barely keep track. "What kind of announcement? Why are you even planning a family dinner? You hate those. Should I cook something special? Should I get a dessert?" I kept my tone steady. I just wanted to get everyone together to share some good news. She went pale. "Good news? What kind of news?" "You'll find out Saturday," I said, refusing to crack. She looked like she was about to throw up. Saturday, April 29th, I set the dining room up like a battlefield. My place setting had a manila envelope with the divorce papers. Another envelope, meant for Dad, held the most damning printed emails. Mom, Brianna, was the first one through the door. She was all smiles, trying to play the role of perfect matriarch. "So where's Jesse?" she asked, glancing around. "What's this big news you two are going to share?" Dad just gave me a look. He didn't say a word, but I knew what he meant. "Do it." 20 minutes late, like clockwork, Evan strolled in, acting like nothing in the world could bother him. He slapped me on the shoulder with that fake grin he always used. During dinner, Jessie barely touched her plate. She just pushed food around, glancing back and forth between Evan and me like she was waiting for a bomb to go off. Mom tried to fill the silence, chatting about the neighbor's new car and some local gossip, but the tension was suffocating. Finally, when we finished eating, Dad raised his beer. "Well, son," he said with an edge in his voice. "What's this big news you wanted to share?" It was time. I took a breath and picked up the envelope, sliding it across the table to Jessie. "These are the divorce papers," I told her calmly. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the AC and a dog barking somewhere outside. Jessie went sheet white, her hands shaking so bad she nearly knocked over her water glass. "Max," she stammered, "what are you saying?" I didn't answer her. Instead, I handed the second envelope to Dad. "There," I said, steady as a rock. 3 months of emails between Jessie and Evan. Everything about their affair. Dad started reading. Even though I'd told him the gist, seeing it on paper clearly rattled him. Evan shot up from his chair, so hard it fell over. "You went through her emails," he shouted, face twisted with outrage. "That's illegal, Max." I didn't even blink. "That's what you're worried about?" I asked, voice calm. "Not the fact you've been screwing my wife for months." Jessie broke down, sobbing into her hands. "Max, please, you have to let me explain." I didn't even look at her. Dad's hands were shaking as he read out loud. "Ron plays golf on Thursdays until 6. You can use the side garage. I'll keep the neighbors from seeing." Mom lunged across the table to try and grab the papers from him, but Dad's hand shot out like a steel trap. "What the hell is this, Brianna?" he roared, voice so loud it made the walls shake. Mom's eyes went wide, panicked. "I can explain," she blurted, breathless. Dad slammed the pages down. "Explain what?" he barked. "How you destroyed this family. How you turned one son against the other. How you lied for months." Finally, Mom's perfect little church lady act shattered. Her voice cracked as she pointed across the table at Jessie. "She came to me. She's the one who seduced Evan. I was just trying to prevent a bigger scandal," she cried, as if that somehow justified anything. Evan, with not even a trace of shame, just shrugged. "We all need attention," he said, voice dripping with fake calm. "Max works 70 hours a week. I was there when he couldn't be." That was it. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, every muscle in my body coiled, and I slammed my fist right into his face with everything I had. I felt the cartilage in his nose give way under my knuckles. He crumpled to the floor, blood pouring down his mouth, crashing into a side table on the way down. Mom screamed, shrill and panicked, like I had just shot him. Dad stood up, his presence filling the room like a thundercloud. "Get him out of this house. Now," he commanded, voice low and dangerous. Evan was still on the floor, clutching his shattered nose. "Dad, you can't do this," he whined through the blood. Dad stared him down, eyes like ice. "You're fired. You're cut off. You're dead to me." Mom shrieked, "Ron, he's your son." But Dad didn't even flinch. "Max is my son," he roared. Evan proved today that blood means nothing if you betray your family. Jessie was sobbing, gasping for breath between every word. "Max, the baby could be yours. Please don't do this. We'll get a paternity test." But I didn't even let her finish. "This is over," I spat. "There's nothing left between you and me." Dad glanced at Evan lying there like trash on the floor, then at Brianna, who was trying to help her precious boy. His voice dropped to a cold monotone. "You owe me $20,000, he told Evan. "You have 30 days to pay it back, or I'll sue you. The free ride is over." Then he turned to Mom, stone-faced. "Brianna, get your coat. We're leaving. You and I have a lot to talk about." The silence after they walked out was so heavy I could feel it in my bones. Jessie looked around at the wreckage of our dining room, eyes raw and red. "What now?" she croaked. I took a breath, steady, certain for the first time in months. "Pack what you can and get out of this house," I told her flatly. "You have until tomorrow morning to figure out where you're going." Her voice cracked one more time. "Max, please. It's over," I yelled, the words echoing off the walls. She flinched, then nodded without a word, and went upstairs, dragging her feet like she was carrying chains. I was left alone, sitting at that dinner table among the shattered plates and broken dreams, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Peace. The divorce was swift, thanks to all the evidence I'd gathered and the ironclad prenup we had signed before the wedding. Jessie didn't stand a chance. Her lawyer was completely disarmed while Matthew, ours, showed up with a legal flamethrower. Everything I had owned before the marriage stayed mine. The house, the investments, every dollar tied to my name. Jessie tried to ask for alimony, but Matthew shut that down in minutes. Arizona was a no-fault divorce state. But infidelity absolutely weighed on the asset split, especially since she'd used our joint funds for her sneaking around. And she had a stable nursing income. The prenup specifically excluded any financial support. In the end, Jessie left with only her personal things, her car, and absolutely nothing else. The house was mine. My investments were untouchable. And the paternity test results? Exactly what I expected, the baby wasn't mine. Jessie ended up moving in with Lauren, the travel nurse who'd helped cover her fake shifts. But from what I heard, Lauren grew tired of the drama fast. Jessie cried non-stop, demanded attention day and night, and expected Lauren to pay for everything while she tried to cope with her single motherhood. 6 weeks later, Lauren finally had enough of Jessie's endless crying, the mood swings, the drama, and kicked her out. As for my dad, he followed through on every single threat. Evan was permanently fired and blacklisted from the company. No more cushy fake jobs, no more pretending to be an executive. But Dad didn't stop there. He made a few calls to other solar contractors around Phoenix. In this business, word travels faster than light. Evan's name was poisoned by the end of the week. Dad also cut him off completely. No more BMW payments, no credit cards, no cash help, nothing. He gave him a clear choice. 30 days to pay me back the $20,000. Dad had told him, stone cold. Or I'll see you in court. That's it. When Evan tried to come crawling back, trying to negotiate or soften Dad's stance, Dad just stared him down. Pay up, he repeated, or I'll see you in court. Your choice. Jessie, meanwhile, tried to contact me over and over. Calls, messages, even showing up at our office to confront me. I had security escort her out every single time. The last pathetic attempt was a long-winded email where she blamed me for her cheating, claiming my work obsession had pushed her into Evan's arms. I didn't even bother to respond. 6 weeks after that dinner, Dad dropped his own bomb. He filed for divorce. After 58 years of being the old school, never give up on marriage type, he was done propping up Mom's lie. Brianna completely fell apart when she realized Dad meant it. The process was brutal. Dad kept the house, the company, and nearly every penny. Mom, after 15 years of playing the perfect homemaker and gossiping about everyone else's failures, found herself working in a department store for $12 an hour, dealing with customers who treated her the same way she used to treat others. Evan ended up crashing at her tiny apartment in a pretty rough neighborhood, a far cry from the polished downtown condo and BMW he'd flaunted. He tried to come back, of course, begged for his job, pleaded for another chance. Dad wouldn't even blink. You chose to betray your own blood, Dad told him, voice like granite. Now you live with the consequences. It's been 2 years since that dinner, and karma hasn't taken a day off since. My relationship with Dad has never been stronger. A few months ago, he made me a partner in the company, giving me a 40% stake. Since then, we've expanded into commercial projects in Tucson and Las Vegas. Business is booming. But the biggest shock came about 6 months ago. Industry contacts started passing along rumors. Evan was in serious legal trouble. He had burned every decent job opportunity in Phoenix and ended up faking employment records to get personal loans. He'd tell banks he was still making $60,000 a year as a solar project manager, when in reality, he was scraping by with temp gigs that barely paid $15 an hour. Eventually, the loan companies started cross-referencing his data, and the whole house of cards fell apart. From what I heard, Evan is now facing federal charges for financial fraud and could be looking at 3 to 5 years in prison. He never did repay Dad that $20,000. Dad won a judgment against him in civil court, but you know what they say. You can't get blood from a stone. He's broke, unemployed, facing federal charges, and living in a rundown studio apartment that probably costs more than he even makes in a month with those temp gigs. And as for Brianna, my mother, life dealt her a brutal hand she never saw coming. About 4 months ago, she was diagnosed with an aggressive, advanced form of leukemia. The doctor started talking about how much time she had left. It felt almost poetic. The same woman who had spent years poisoning our family from the inside out ended up betrayed by her own blood. Because when you destroy every bond around you, when you burn every bridge, you end up facing the storms alone. Dad had already closed that chapter. And me? My relationship with her ended the day I opened those emails. Evan, her golden boy, her pride, the one she protected no matter what, barely shows up at her hospital room, too busy worrying about his trial and a possible prison sentence. I guess he doesn't have much time to sit with a dying mother. One of her neighbors told me Brianna had been trying to reach me and Dad, wanting to make peace before the end came. But some bridges, once burned to the ground, can't be rebuilt with last-minute apologies. Dad was blunt about it. She made her choices, he said. Now she can live, or die, with the consequences. And me? I haven't responded to any of her calls or messages either. The same woman who helped my wife plot to destroy my life couldn't come crying for sympathy now. Well, except for one time. About 8 months ago, before her diagnosis, it was a Saturday morning. I was at home having coffee when someone started pounding on my door like they meant to break it down. I checked the peephole, and there she was. Brianna. She looked like a wreck. Hair unwashed, mascara streaking down her cheeks, clearly drunk. It was 10 in the morning, and she could barely stand upright. The moment I opened the door, she lunged forward, screaming like a lunatic. "You selfish scumsucker," she shrieked, spittle flying. "You destroyed this family. This is all your fault." I stepped back, keeping calm. "You're drunk. Get off my property." Her face twisted into a monster's. "Don't you dare tell me what to do," she howled. "My marriage is ruined because of you. Evan is in trouble because of you. I'm alone because of you." That was it. I let it out. "You want to know what really happened, Mom?" I fired back, cold as ice. "You chose your golden child over everyone else. You helped him betray me because you thought he deserved what I had built. You picked a side, and you were wrong." She staggered, wiping tears across her face, voice raw. "That's not true. I was trying to protect everyone." "No." I snapped, my tone like a blade. "You were protecting him from consequences, just like you always did. And now you're paying the price." She crumbled for a second, chest heaving, but the venom came right back. "He's your brother. Family forgives. How can you let me suffer like this?" My heart felt nothing. I meant every word. "Family doesn't stab each other in the back," I said, cold and steady. She shrieked through broken sobs. "You're a heartless son of a—" I cut her off, voice low and final. "You don't deserve to be called a mother. If you think I'm going to feel sorry for you after everything you did, you're mistaken. Even if you were dying, I wouldn't forgive you. Do you understand?" Her face went pale, almost gray. Even in her drunken, miserable state, those words seemed to gut her like a knife. I slammed the door in her face. "Max, please," she sobbed on the other side, pounding her fists on the wood. I didn't answer. I just threw the deadbolt, turned, and walked away. For about 10 minutes, she kept wailing, scratching at the door like some wounded animal. Finally, her cries faded, and I heard her stumbling down the steps. After that, she didn't try again until word came about her illness. But the scene that truly marked me, the one that still replays in my mind, happened about 3 weeks ago. It was late at night. I was at the office finishing up electrical plans for a new commercial site when there was a faint knock on the glass door. I looked up and saw an old, beat-up car idling outside. Evan. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost so much weight, wearing wrinkled clothes that probably hadn't been washed in a week. His face was haggard, hollow, eyes red like he hadn't slept in days. I opened the door, standing in the threshold. "Max," he said, voice cracking. "I need to talk to you, man." I shook my head dead calm. "We have nothing to talk about." He shifted from foot to foot, on the edge of collapse. "I'm going to prison," he blurted out. "It could be 5 years." His hands were shaking. "I know I screwed up, Max. I know I betrayed you. But you're my brother. You're all I have left." I almost laughed. The audacity. "And why?" I asked, "Should I help you?" He fell apart right in front of me, breaking down like a kid. "Because I was an idiot," he sobbed. "I was jealous. Of your house, of Dad respecting you, of your perfect marriage. I wanted that. And I ruined everything in the worst way possible." Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry, Max. I'm truly sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. Just don't turn your back on me." I felt a strange chill, hearing those words. After everything, he had the nerve to plead for forgiveness? "There's no fixing this," I said. "Not after what you did." He reached out, desperate, trembling. "Mom is dying alone," he cried. "Dad won't even look at me. You're all I have left. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll work for free. I'll sign over everything I own. Please, Max." I watched him for a long moment. That pathetic figure in front of me was not my brother anymore. I couldn't even see a piece of the kid I grew up with. "You didn't just betray me," I told him, ice in every syllable. "You tried to trick me into raising a child that wasn't mine." He wiped snot from his nose, shaking his head. "I know it was horrible. It was a mistake, but we're family, aren't we?" I leaned forward, voice down to a whisper that cut like a razor. "We never were. Max, please. You made your choices." I finished. "Now live with them." I started to shut the door, then paused. "And Evan, don't ever show up here again. You're not my brother anymore." I closed it, slow and final. Through the glass I saw him stand there, sobbing like a little boy, before he finally turned and stumbled back to that rusty car. A few minutes later, he drove off into the night. 2 weeks later, they arrested him at that same sad apartment. The trial is next month. And the best part of all this? I didn't have to plot revenge or get my hands dirty. The truth took care of everything. Time, reality, consequences, they did all the work for me. Today my focus is exactly where it should be, on what adds to my life. The company is growing, expanding to new cities, building a future I can actually believe in. I have a peaceful, stable home. My investments are solid. But above all, I have peace of mind. Because sometimes the best answer to betrayal is to just walk away and let time finish what you cannot. Brianna is dying alone. Evan is drowning in the quicksand he made for himself. Jessie, she wakes up every day with the consequences of her choices staring her in the face. And me? I finally understood my own worth. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.